All right, it is 6 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. I'm delighted to say Simon Collings joins us now from the Evening Standard to give us the thoughts on the Arsenal perspective specifically. Simon, we're in the middle of a late season swoon for Arsenal at the moment. Can they stop it?
Doesn't feel like it after last night. I think everyone knew sort of Arsenal headed to the Etihad with the title on the line, given the situation with City's game in hands. And as much as it was about the point for me for Arsenal, I kind of feel they needed a result to shift the momentum, to get the title back on track. And now we've seen so many times in the past when City get ahead in title races, they just gallop off into the distance. And I think for Arsenal, it's kind of feels like that dream of winning the title has gone. And yeah, the nature of the result as well last night probably did damage too.
The performance was so overwhelming from Manchester City. Is there anything in retrospect that Arsenal could have done to interrupt the pattern that we saw?
I mean, the difficult thing is, if you look at who he had available, I think he probably played what most supporters would argue was his best team. The debate I would have is, as difficult as it is, how great Arsenal been, do you need to sort of adapt when you're playing someone like City? And before the match, I was looking through to see which teams had success there. And I think Brentford were one of the few teams that won the only second Premier League team to stop Haaland scoring. And they dropped very deep, played three centre-backs and targeted De Bruyne. That was their plan. And Arsenal basically did the opposite of that, pressed very high, gave Haaland space to go into. So I think in retrospect, not so much the personnel, but the way that Arsenal set up kind of played into City's hands. If you're going to push that high, if you're going to try and get tight to Haaland, you run the risk of him rolling you. And I think the way we saw him and De Bruyne linked up summed up how Pep won that battle quite comfortably.
It sounds, Simon, like a bit of a tired cliche maybe and rationalisation after the fact, but the experience of the City players in games like this, games that titles could hinge on, versus the lack thereof within the Arsenal squad, is that a factor that we should take into consideration after last night?
I think so. I think you've got to appreciate, for a lot of these Arsenal players, this is their first title race. And I think it was the same at the game at the Emirates, where City just sort of managed the whole occasion a bit better than Arsenal. And it was a point that Thierry Henry had made a few sort of weeks ago, that Arsenal had got a bit too emotional in this title race, which in itself is tiring for the players. And City just almost kind of feel like a robotic juggernaut, which just rolls on and on and on. And Haaland sort of sums it up, doesn't it? You never really felt like last night that they were going to sort of get overawed and lose their heads. They were just efficient. They got the job done. And for Arsenal, maybe there's something to learn in that if you want to be a team that's constantly competing at the top, sometimes you've got to try and take the emotion out of these things.
The absence of William Saliba undoubtedly crops up when a result like that happens, or results of recent happens. And he's been out since that Lisbon game, and you look at Arsenal's form since and the goals they've conceded, Simon, are there just no answers? Is Rob Holding just not good enough as a replacement? Has this Saliba injury almost led to the downfall of the title race?
Yeah, and the big thing with that Saliba injury in the night it happened was that Tomiyasu injured his knee on the same occasion. So I think if Tomiyasu was fit, it's quite conceivable you would have been seeing White and Gabriel playing centre-backs and Tomiyasu playing right-back. But that right side options was dwindled quite significantly. I mean, Holding, he's a fine squad player. I think we've seen in the Europa League that he comes in and does a job late on in games. He can come on and help the team, but for an extended period of time, which is basically he's going to play sort of 11 league games on the spin, I don't think he's good enough to be playing for a team that's competing at the top of the Premier League. And it's quite brutal to say that, but it's just a matter of the fact. And when Arsenal look at the recruitment in the summer and their investment, and they want to improve the squad, midfield we know is a big area. We know they want to sign Declan Rice, but I think this run of games has showed how there needs to be someone coming in at centre back. There needs to be a bit more depth for Gabriel and Saliba, because at the moment the drop off just seems too big.
They also will next season have proper Champions League action to contend with, and so therefore the need for the squad it's a force multiplier. It's not just, you can't kind of see your way through the early stages of the Champions League, particularly when you don't have the experience of it that Arsenal in this squad don't have.
Definitely, and I think there's definitely an accusation to be lobbied at Arteta that he hasn't rotated enough this season. I mean, the first half of the campaign, as you say, he had the luxury of playing the Europa League, and he would basically make 10, 11 changes on a Thursday night and then bring back the Premier League team on the weekend. He won't be able to do that. next season. So they need to have greater depth, more competition for places. They've got it in some areas. I think some of the recruitment's been very good. I think someone like Trossard underlines that. But yeah, next season he's going to have to be, stronger with his rotation. And City are the best at that because they've got the best squad. I mean, I can't think of anyone else who would have a player score a hat trick at Wembley at the weekend and then bench him the next game. But City can do that because they're so strong. But Arsenal next season, that is going to be an element that they've got to try and manage the squad a bit better.
We were talking earlier on and wondering if there will be an opportunity in the summer in terms of the transfer. Like the Cronkies have invested massively at moments where it feels like the team are about to succeed in their American football team. If fans of the Rams will know that they've splashed money, and there's a downside in American football in that you kind of have to pay that back at some point. Whereas in soccer, if you invest in the team and you get good young players, then you actually get to reap the benefits of that long term. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Cronkies double down and think, this is a strong position and let's build strength on strength. So there's at least some reason to suspect or hope that they will be involved in big transfer dealings and a number of big signings this summer. I think the Cronkies, since the past few years when they've sort of turned the club and their reputation around, we've seen that they have a willingness to spend money in the transfer market if the deals are right, and they backed Arteta quite heavily. And he is someone who does put pressure on the club both publicly and privately. We've seen in press conferences he talks about maximising every transfer window. I think he's only had one window when he's been at the club where they haven't signed someone. So I think Arsenal will be wanting to kick on from this. The spaces of the squad is there. It's very strong. And the fact, you say you've got those young players who will get better. But the argument that Arteta will make, when he's talking to the board and talking to Edu is they're now playing Champions League football. You need that bigger squad. You need more quality. And that's something they've got to address in summer.
How far behind City are Arsenal, Simon, in those terms? And we know the financial clout of City, of course, and the money that's behind them. Martin Keown, we were making the point earlier, he was saying on TV last night that he feels Arsenal are about 10 years behind Man City at the moment, which maybe is quite reactive to a result like last night, but you can't really argue. A lot of teams feel like they are a generation almost behind City.
Yeah, I think for 10 years is a long amount of time. I'd still think they're a few years behind City, and just because is that squad depth, the strength that City have right through the squad, and Phil Foden being out for a month and it's barely talked about. Nathan Ake misses out last night, and in comes Kanji and does a brilliant job at left back. The way that they can cope with these injuries is so much better than anyone else. And Arsenal, I think when they've got their full 11 and everyone playing, and you'd include Saliba in that, I think they can match Man City and match basically any side. But the challenge is when they don't have everyone fit, which is going to happen across the course of the season, are they able to maintain the level? And that's what City can do better than anyone else. I think Arsenal, when you look at the squad, it's so young, it can get better, it can improve, but it needs a bit of additions and it needs some time to try and catch City.
I know the Arsenal fans are like, we're building and it's been a great season and this is us now, we're going to be contenders. But history is actually littered with teams who come up, have one of these seasons and then don't actually get the opportunity ever to win the league title again. That's not saying that this team won't, but they will need significant investment. There's no guarantee that every signing they make pays off. It was right there for them if they'd won the 3 games that they drew from a 2-0 up at Liverpool. From that position to get to here, it's been like a fairly catastrophic swoon.
It's been really painful, I think, for the way these sort of 4 games have gone. They've taken 3 points. As you say, it's the manner of what's happened to get to the situation they're in. And when they look back over this run of games, I think they'll be disappointed with the City match, of course. But those games against West Ham and Southampton, I think the ones that they'll look at and realise, dropping those points, it stopped them coming to the Etihad with the cushion. It gave City the door was open for them. It gave them the chance to push. And I really think for Arsenal, as much as the title we feel like it has gone, they need to finish the season in a strong fashion with some wins, because, as you say, it has been a brilliant season. But for supporters, you can feel it sort of fizzling out, and I don't think they'll want that to seep into the summer and next season. They'll want to finish on a strong showing.
What did you make of Mikel Arteta's tactics last night, Simon? Because I was making the point earlier that, and Sean Wright-Phillips made a similar point on TV last night as well, where you can either go full press against City, you can sit back and let them at you, but Arsenal almost last night were in between. it was almost like they were unsure of what exactly to do and how to approach that press. But is that on Mikel Arteta? Did he get his tactics right or wrong last night?
I mean, I think he came to the Etihad to play the way that Arsenal have all season, as opposed to trying to nullify what City do. And they were getting pulled around so much. I mean, Holding and Gabriel, for a lot of the goals, the distance between them is crazy for two centre backs, getting dragged up the pitch. And for me, I kind of feel like Arsenal needed to show City maybe a bit more respect, maybe drop a bit deeper, not try and press them so high. I think I can remember from that very first game of the season where we saw Holland against West Ham racing through sort of 30, 40 metres and realising, wow, this guy's pace is incredible. And if you give him that space, he'll cause you problems. And I feel too often they were letting Haaland get up ahead of steam, get at them. And yes, I said, played into City's hands. And when Arsenal look back at it, I wonder if that's something that they'll think, maybe we should have tried to drop deeper, try and make it harder for them. And even at half time, everyone could see it wasn't working. Didn't really change it, and most of the substitutions again were sort of like for like. So I think that's something that some Arsenal fans will have criticism with Arteta in game, sort of tactical tweaks. Is it there, as opposed to the changes being trying to keep Plan A working better than it is?
Quick question about Katie McCabe. She was captain in the 2-2 draw at Wolfsburg in the first leg of the Champions League semi-final. They're dropping like flies in terms of the injuries that Arsenal have at the moment, so it's no gimme, no guarantee at all. It never is in the Champions League semi-final second leg, but her performance was so dynamic and suggests she probably will be captain for the rest of the season. Is that likely to be the case, do you think?
I think it could easily be the case. I mean, I remember being at the Bayern Munich game when she was walking off the pitch in a protective boot and crutches, and then somehow she's playing on the Sunday. So yeah, quite ridiculous, her powers of recovery. But she is someone at the moment, that Arsenal squad are missing 4 definite starters for the rest of the season, and a lot of what they're playing on is sort of spirit and energy and trying to keep going, and she sort of epitomises that more than anyone else, and she's a big person in that dressing room. For the second leg, they're going to have hopefully a sellout. The club are pretty hopeful about that. I think they're close to sort of 55,000 tickets, and the value of that will be absolutely massive for Arsenal. I don't think you can really underestimate what it will do for that team to have that big support. So yeah, it's a difficult situation for them, but McCabe playing a vital role for sure.
It's a really interesting turnaround from a bit where it looked like she was actually on the way out. Now, there was never a transfer request, at least that we know of. I don't know if the bid was formalised to a point where they had to really consider it, but it just goes to show you, when you stick your head down and keep playing football, anything can happen.
Massively, yeah. And I think it was Chelsea were the sort of biggest club that were interested in buying her. And when you have Chelsea trying to sign you, I think it shows you're doing something right. For Edeval, she's a really important player simply because of what she brings in the dressing room, we say, but also her versatility. We've seen her at left back. She was playing further up the pitch at times against Wolfsburg. That sort of player who can slot it in anywhere to a team is absolutely valuable. And I think from Arsenal's side, there was never a desire to let her go. And right now, I think we're seeing the sort of value of what she brings to that team.
Simon, good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
It's Simon Collings from the Evening Standard giving us his thoughts on the situation at Arsenal.